My name is Eric Jackman, and I'm from beautiful Peterborough, New Hampshire. We got Peterborough in the house? Woo! Where are some people from? Throw out some towns.
Sharon, Vermont.
Sharon, Vermont.
East Alstead.
East Alstead. Where?
Croydon, Massachusetts.
Beautiful, Massachusetts. How about other states? What other states do we have in the house? Brattleboro, Vermont, the home of Bernie Sanders, 20% to 9%. We got something better than Bernie, believe me. So as a 22-year resident of the most beautiful region in the world, the Monadnock region, I've been involved in 5 New Hampshire primaries, and I'm so excited to kick off number 6, just like Tom Brady's 6th Super Bowl ring. 2020 is shaping up to be a campaign for the ages. We're going to be tripping over candidates. I mean, we already are. Gillibrand, I hear, is in town today. This event's going to be better, believe me. I found a solution to our crisis on the border, Trump is now saying. He's going to build a wall on Democratic candidates for president. We'll put Cory Booker up there, Kamala over here. We'll put Beto over here. I mean, he's down there already because he's in El Paso. And it's going to be incredible. And for good measure and bipartisanship, right at the center of the wall, we'll put Chris Christie. No one will get past that wall. Right? So with such a crowded field, how do we decide on a candidate? Well, I'll tell you how I've decided on one. At 32 years old, there's been wars going on for half of my life, more than half of my life. And I'm sure for most of you, no matter how old you are, you can remember a war always going on in our country. Whether warranted or not, that's always up for debate. But we're in a constant state of warfare, it seems. Now, the ones that I've been alive for, specifically starting with Iraq, thousands of lives have been lost. Brave Americans. Trillions of dollars wasted. And numerous countries completely and totally destroyed, with over 1 million innocent people killed. Aren't we ready for an end to that madness? Yeah. Haven't we had enough of that? I've had enough of this, I can tell you. The harsh cycle of endless war and constant posturing by our corporate-controlled government and media has left our great nation fractured, weakened, and sick. The only candidate in this race who is addressing these issues with clarity, legitimacy, courage, and authenticity will be standing right behind this microphone in a few minutes. Right? Am I right? As a veteran who served in Iraq, Representative Gabbard truly knows the immense cost of regime change wars of choice. This isn't some distant thing for Tulsi Gabbard. Unlike those callous and corrupt and evil entities who send young Americans to far-off lands who only see dollar signs, Tulsi only sees her fellow soldiers and warriors willing to make the ultimate sacrifice on behalf of their country. On top of her real-life experience, Tulsi is willing to talk to the other side of the aisle and people she does not agree with in the name of getting things done. And that is greatly missing in Washington right now, and boy, do we need that. Yeah. Representative Gabbard is strong-minded, independent, and courageous. We all know she met with Assad in Syria and President-elect Trump, showing her maverick tendencies and that she's not afraid to meet with dictators. Tulsi also has appealed to many people from many different backgrounds. In fact, just before this event, I had the honor to speak to former Minnesota Governor independent Minnesota Governor Jesse Ventura. And he wanted me to deliver a message to everybody. I love Tulsi Gabbard. She's a strong, independent-minded warrior, and she speaks her mind. She kind of reminds me of a Hawaiian Wonder Woman. But in all seriousness, Tulsi has all those traits, and really, she came to my attention when she broke with the DNC courageously when Bernie was dead screwed. We had enough of that. We are tired of war, we are tired of corruption, we are tired of lying, we are tired of cheating, and we are ready for Tulsi Gabbard. So ladies and gentlemen, please give her a warm Emerald City aloha to the next President of the United States, Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard!
Thank you all so much for being here today. It's a beautiful day. It's great to be back here again in Keene. Great to see so many familiar faces. Can I move this, or we want these other mics on here?
We need those mics.
Okay, it's okay. I don't have to. I'll cooperate. It's wonderful, wonderful to be back, and at such an important time. As you all know, I see so many familiar faces, but I always like to start our conversations with aloha. 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 To set the stage for our conversation. Aloha means so much more than hello and goodbye. It's what people most often associate it with, but really what aloha means is I come to you with respect and with love. Aloha is a recognition that we are all children of God. We're all connected. Regardless of the color of our skin, where we come from, who we love, how we worship, how much money we make. All of these things fall to the wayside when we come together in this spirit of aloha. Is when we love each other, when we care for each other, when we respect each other, we stand up for each other. We stand up to protect one another. We stand up to fight for one another. The corruption of spirit that is casting a dark shadow over our country right now can only be defeated when we stand together in this spirit of service. When we stand together in this spirit of aloha. There are so many different challenges that we face, so many different issues that we are confronted by, that are confronting our friends, our neighbors, our families, our communities, and our country. And as we look at each of these different issues, and we look at the root cause of these problems that we are facing, they can all be connected back to this corruption of spirit by our leaders and people in positions of power who are driven not by this spirit of aloha, but instead by a desire or motivation for more money, more power, more fame, more notoriety, driven by these self-serving interests rather than the interests of the people. Now, when our nation's founders laid the foundation for this country, they did so out of a recognition of each of our inalienable rights bestowed upon us by God, that we are all equal, and that our government must be one that is of the people, by the people, and for the people. Now let me ask you, do you see that dream that they had for our country existing today in our society? No. Do you see in our government this representation of you, of the people, by the people, and for the people? No. Instead, we have a government that is of the super wealthy, by the special interests, and for them rather than for the people. This is what is at the heart of the problems that we face. And this is why we are here today because we have to do something about this. We have to take action. We have to stand up for each other and for our future. To bring back this spirit of service before self that our founders had in mind for this country. A country with a government made of leaders who are there to serve the people and not serve themselves. For too long now, self-serving politicians, greedy corporations, lobbyists representing special interests have ruled the day in Washington, drowning out the voices of the people, deaf to the calls and the cries of the needs of the people. Instead, passing legislation, whether it be on health care or on finance reform or criminal justice, education, go down the defense, go down the list. These policies that are being passed are not being done so with the people's interest in mind. And the people suffer as a result. We suffer as a result. In April of 2003, almost 15 years ago, I took an oath. I raised my right hand. I volunteered to serve our country in the Army National Guard. And in making that promise to serve and protect our country, to serve our people, and to put my life on the line to do so, I took that same promise that every service member takes, to put service above self. I'm proud to still serve in the Army National Guard today. And it is those values, those soldiers' values, those principles of service above self that I will bring to the White House. To bring back honesty, integrity, and respect back to the presidency. Because that's what you deserve. That is what our country deserves. As a soldier, I've seen the cost of war. During my first deployment to Iraq, I was assigned in a medical unit. And one of the very first things, in fact, the first thing that I did every single day, was go through a list of names. And that list of names was every single service member who had been hurt or injured, who was a casualty of war the day before. Every single day as I went through that list, name by name, I was looking to see if there were any soldiers from our unit, our brigade of nearly 3,000, to make sure that they were getting the care that they needed, either there in country or to get them evacuated as quickly as possible. As I went through that list every single day, name by name, I saw the names and I thought of the loved ones, I thought of the families and friends and people back home, those who pay the price for these wars. It's something I have held with me in my heart every day ever since. And I wondered how many politicians in Washington were kept up at night thinking about those names, thinking about those people, thinking about those who would lay their lives down, who would never be able to make that trip home, thinking about those who would come home with both visible and invisible wounds, wounds that they would carry with them for years to come. And I got angry because I felt like the answer was not very many. Not very many of these powerful politicians were kept up at night thinking about the consequences of their actions. It is because those of us who have seen the cost of war firsthand, It is because of those experiences that we fight so hard for peace. I want to take a moment now to recognize any veterans who are here with us. I ask you to just stand and let us thank you for your service. Thank you for your service and your sacrifice. It is not only our veterans who pay the price. It is actually every one of us. Trillions of dollars that are spent on these regime change wars are dollars coming out of every one of our pockets. Dollars that we know are needed desperately in our communities right here at home. Just before coming here, I had lunch with a group of teachers from Nashua. They were telling me about the challenges they're facing, the difficulty and the lack of resources that they need to provide best education possible for our kids. Talking about the lack of mental health resources needed for our kids. They talked about how they have a coat and clothes closet at their school because too many kids are coming who don't have enough clothes to stay warm. How they have a food pantry for kids who are coming to school hungry so they can't afford to buy lunch. So as we think about the cost of war, yes, it is our veterans who pay an incredible price. It is those lives lost, both American lives and the lives of people in the countries where we wage these regime change wars. And it is every single American whose needs are not being met because of the trillions of dollars that are being spent on these wars. There is an even greater threat that is at the center of all of these issues that we are talking about here today. And the issues are many that we need to address. And this threat is the fact that we are at a greater threat of nuclear catastrophe today than ever before in history. Than ever before in history. Now this is something that is all too real for us in Hawaii, given our proximity to North Korea's increased nuclear capabilities, the increasing range of their missiles. Where just a year ago, a little over a year ago, there was a cell phone alert that went out to over 1 million phones all across the state. Some of you are nodding your head. I think you know what happened. This alert said that a missile is incoming. Seek shelter immediately. This is not a drill. And in those minutes after that alert went out, people were terrified. Just think for a moment what you would do if you knew you had just minutes to live. As we're standing here today. What would you do if you had just minutes to live? We had families who were piling their kids into the car and driving to the mountains to see if there's somewhere, some cave, some place they could find shelter. A friend of mine who's in the National Guard, one of her medics, started driving at almost 100 miles an hour to try to get to his child who was in town. Father lowered his little girl down a manhole cover into a storm drain, thinking that may be the only place where she could be kept safe. This is real. There's no shelter. There was nowhere for people to go and hide. And so this alarm turned out to be false. Turned out to be a false alarm, but it was a wake-up call. It was a wake-up call for everyone in Hawaii. It was a wake-up call for our country. Because of the increasing tensions between the United States and nuclear-armed countries like Russia and China, we're in this situation where we have a new Cold War. which has only been exacerbated by, this threat has only been exacerbated by President Trump withdrawing the United States from the INF Treaty, now sparking off a new nuclear arms race, ratcheting up these tensions that bring us closer to the precipice of a nuclear catastrophe. Back during the last Cold War, there were so many examples of our world being destroyed because Russia thought that there was an attack coming from the United States, and at the last minute they saw, oh, that was a weather satellite being launched by another country. There are so many examples of these near disasters that those who are around at that time remember all too well. Well, this is the situation we're facing today, except there are more of these nuclear weapons in the world today, and they are far more powerful. I'm running for president to end our regime change wars, to work to end this new Cold War, and to walk us back from the precipice of this dark threat of nuclear war. Because our very future is at stake. The future of our country, the future of our planet's at stake. And the trillions of dollars that these warmongers want to continue to spend on all of these weapons are dollars that we need to be investing in the needs of our people right here at home.
Yay.
In our health care, in providing for our kids and their education, in rebuilding our infrastructure, in reforming our criminal justice system, in investing in agriculture, making sure that we have clean air and clean water to drink, making sure that we have healthy food to eat, ensuring our very future. Our future is at stake, and it is up to every single one of us to take a stand now and make a choice about which direction we want to go in our future. Will we stand idly by and allow powerful, self-serving politicians lead us to the brink of nuclear war? Or will we stand up? Will we stand up and stand together, building this movement for peace? Building this movement for peace and equality and justice and opportunity for every single American. When we stand together in this spirit of service, when we stand together with those what I know are soldiers' values and principles of service above self, this is how we defeat those who are leading us to darkness. That when we stand together to bend the arc of history away from war and towards peace, we know that we are up against significant challenges. We know that those who benefit from perpetual war will fight tooth and nail every step of the way. But I also know that when we the people stand up, that when we stand together united in this spirit of service and caring for one another, there is no obstacle we cannot overcome. We know we can pass legislation like Medicare for All that will take care of every one of our brothers and sisters. That when we do that, we know we can pass real criminal justice reform that stops tearing our families apart, that stops throwing our black and brown brothers and sisters into prison, while letting companies like Purdue Pharma, whose opioids are ruining and devastating lives all across this country. Well, they walk away scot-free with their pockets full because they're rich and they can afford it. We know when we stand together we can take care of our environment. We can take care of our planet. We can make sure that each and every one of us has clean air to breathe, that each and every one of us has clean water to drink, and that we have a future that will not only exist, but will be beautiful for generations to come. We know that when we stand together in this spirit of service above self, making sure that our priorities are straight, that we are putting the well-being of the people in our planet first, then we know there is a bright future for all of us ahead. That's why I'm running for president. That's why I'm asking you to stand with me. Stand with me in this spirit of service. Stand with me in this spirit of aloha. And I know that we can and we will, because we must, make the kind of change we need to see for our future. Thank you so much. Thank you.
If you'd like to ask the Congresswoman a question, we'll do a few questions and some question and answer, and right over there. So thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
A comment and two questions.
Sure.
Thank you for standing up for Bernie 3 years ago. For my wife, how old are you?
Only because it's your wife asking. I'm 37. I'll be 38 soon.
38, that was my guess.
What can be done about Venezuela? What can we do?
A great question. The United States needs to stop and get out of the regime change business. The Venezuelan people are suffering under incredible hardship. There are great challenges that are before them. And their move for democracy and their choices that they're making about their future must be made by them, not by the United States, not by any other country. Yes, sir.
Yes, Guy from Massachusetts, 2 towns south of Nashua.
Thank you. I flew into Boston this morning and then we drove up to Nashua, so we probably passed through your town.
Just a couple comments quick. First, I was in touch with the office in DC and contacted all my state federal reps for you to be Speaker of the House.
Oh.
And then we have to reintroduce the Return to Prudent Banking Act in the House and the Senate.
Thank you for asking. I literally had a conversation with my staff yesterday, and working with Congressman Marcy Kaptur, we are introducing the Return to Prudent Banking Act, which would reinstate the Glass-Steagall Act.
After that, we have to get back to the JFK vision. The National Bank used credit to build up our infrastructure, and we could go create an infrastructure bank of the Americas to help out other countries for their populations also. And we have to be a sovereign nation to help other sovereign nations solve problems for humanity.
Thank you very much. You know, as we look to just comment briefly on your second or third point there about investing in our infrastructure, the need is great. Every single community that I have visited, I think every single community across the country has a huge need for real investment in infrastructure. This is not limited to Democratic districts or Republican districts. This is something that affects every single one of us. It's how we do that and making sure that we invest in our infrastructure in a smart and sustainable way that is going to be critical. Once again, as we look at cost and how we do that, this is how we've got to work this out. But I will tell you, as For example, we spend nearly $3 billion a month in Afghanistan. Think about how many roads could be rebuilt or repaved here for that amount of money. So as we look at our priorities as a country, this is why I talk about how much we are spending on these wars and on the nation building that often follows, is because those are dollars that are not coming to invest in infrastructure, to rebuild our communities here at home. Yes, sir.
How you doing, Tulsi?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. My name is Kevin. I'm from Worcester, Massachusetts. Okay, cool. First of all, I want to thank you for running for president in 2020, and I want to let you in on a little secret. I actually wrote you in on 2016.
Oh, thank you. You had a head start.
All right. So I guess my question is, how do you feel so far about your treatment and/or kind of exclusion by the media thus far in the campaign?
You are obviously a visionary, sir. So thank you. Look, I knew before coming into this, both from history and from firsthand experience, that when you stand up, that when we stand up and we speak the truth, there are a lot of folks who are afraid of the truth. There are a lot of folks who feel threatened by the truth, especially because the truth exposes lies. It exposes them for what they are, what they're doing, and that their motives are not actually in the interests of the people. This is the reality that we're dealing with, but this only fuels me and motivates me even more to do what we are doing. We can't afford to cower in a corner because someone is barking loudly or someone is saying to shut up. I don't know about you guys, when someone tells me to be quiet, I speak up louder. Because this is not about me. This is not about any one of us as individuals. This is about all of us. This is about our people, and it's about our future. When I was deployed to Iraq, there was a big sign that was at one of the main gates to our camp. It was the north gate where a lot of the patrols and things went in and out every day. So I saw that sign a lot. And that sign read in big block letters, "Is today the day?" Is today the day? It was a reminder for every single one of us that any day could be our last. It was a reminder to be grateful for the time that we have and to make the very most of every single day. Make the most of every single day. We don't have any time to waste. None of us knows what day could be our last. So what are we going to do? What are we willing to do? How far are we willing to go? To fight for each other and to fight for our country and our future. We have no time to waste. Literally, our future is at stake. So, if you ask me, how does it make me feel? I'm fired up. I'm fired up.
Hi, my name is Nibras, and I'm actually from Libya, and I'm here for asylum applicants, and this is my 4th year. And I came here because I love your spirits. I watch you through Facebook and YouTube, and you have a very strong spirits, and I would love to really make it for the Congress. My question for you, as my case, how you can really stand up for the war, to stop the war in general? Because if you do that, it will be like itself war. It will be hard, it will not be big, like easy. Do you have like really basics, concrete plan for your, I will say, candidates? So you will like succeed for that? The second thing is the health issue. I'm here, like, I'm seeing what's going on, and I see the local people, what exactly they are suffering from, like the health cares, the education, and these things. And I would love really to push more education for people, young people. And this is, it's a kind of building the country more. And as much you build the country, I will really to do the same for my country one day, to be back to my country and do the same. So thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here and for being a voice for so many. The Constitution has placed the responsibility to declare war in the United States Congress. When was the last time the United States Congress passed a declaration of war? World War II. That means the executive branch, the administration, it's across both parties, Democrats and Republicans, have been responsible for the waging of regime change wars, overthrowing dictators in other countries over decades. So Congress needs to stop abdicating its responsibility. But I'm running for president because in that position as Commander-in-Chief, I will have the power and the ability to put an end to these regime change wars like the one that has ravaged and devastated your home country of Libya. You know, so often these regime change wars are waged in the name of humanitarianism, with good intention. If you look at what has happened to your country since the United States went and lodged a regime change war there, people are suffering far more now than they were before. You have people we hear about, we read about in reports where men and women and children are being sold in open slave markets in Libya. You have terrorist groups who are running rampant across the country. Terrorist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, these countries that threaten people there, they threaten Americans, they threaten the United States. So not only are these regime change wars not alleviating the suffering of people, it's only making things worse. It is only increasing suffering and loss of life. It is also making our country less safe by strengthening these terrorist groups. We've seen this occur in Iraq, Libya, and Syria. So the saying, the path to hell is often paved with good intentions, rings true. And it requires strong and courageous leadership to make it so that we do not continue to repeat these disastrous, devastating decisions that our country has made throughout history, and to put an end to these regime change wars. That's the leadership that I will bring to the White House as Commander-in-Chief. By doing that, then we have these resources that we need to invest in educating our young people. To invest in education, to invest in making sure everyone gets the health care that they need. So again, thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing your voice and your story.
Thank you for your story. Thank you.
Thank you. What's your name?
My name's Alicia.
Thanks for coming, Alicia.
Are you going to tear down the wall that Donald Trump is building?
With my hands.
I believe you can do that.
Thank you, Alicia, for your question. Thanks for being here. Look, it is unfortunate to see how, once again, Donald Trump is trying to tear our country apart, trying to divide people and distract people for his own political benefit. This is a problem that we see across our politics that exists in both parties, frankly. And this is the problem, this is what needs to change. This culture of leadership that puts politics ahead of people is what needs to change. So as we talk about a wall, really what we should be talking about is how do we secure our borders? How do we make sure that we have the resources going to the judges and administrative officers and people who are providing care for those at the border who are seeking asylum? How do we reform our immigration system so it actually works? It actually works for us, works for our economy, works for people. This is the conversation that we need to be having. There are different sections of our border where there are some form of barriers. They've been there now for many of them for 10, 20, 30, 40 years probably. So rather than dealing in political football sound bites, let's all make a choice to elevate the conversation to actually deal with the root cause of the problem. Because only by doing that can we find the solution. Thank you.
Hi, Tulsi.
Aloha.
My name is Terry, and you've spoken about quite a few issues that face our nation already today, but my question is, what do you think is the most critical issue facing our country today, and what would you do about it?
Thank you. Thanks for the question. The most critical issue is the threat that we are facing. This threat of both the cost of war and this nuclear catastrophe that casts a dark shadow over us. And the reason why this is the most important issue that faces us is because it is one that threatens our very existence, that threatens our planet, that threatens our future. There are no leaders in this country who are addressing this threat. In fact, many of them are adding fuel to the fire, inflaming their rhetoric and beating these war drums. So unless we address this threat, we cannot have the resources nor the peace of mind to address healthcare, to address education, to address infrastructure, to address the many things that we've talked about today. This requires, as far as how to address this requires strong leadership, requires courage, requires a willingness to deal with other countries in a spirit of cooperation rather than conflict, to dial down these tensions that have gotten us to a place where we are in a new Cold War, to de-escalate the situation where Donald Trump has walked away from an INF treaty rather than being the leader that our country needs and strengthening it, expanding it, bringing other countries into the fold so that we are not proliferating more of these arms and nuclear weapons. We are instead exercising the leadership that President Reagan and Gorbachev exercised back nearly 30 years ago when this INF treaty was put in place, where because of that treaty, we have far fewer of these weapons today than existed at that time. Because of that treaty, we averted nuclear disaster. So bringing that leadership, being willing to have those conversations, to create a culture of cooperation rather than conflict with other countries in the world, especially with these other nuclear-armed countries, so that we can work to end this new Cold War and work to de-escalate the situation and get us to a place where we are not facing this threat, where we can walk out from under this shadow of nuclear war. Again, this allows us to both have the resources to be able to work on all of the things that we know our people and our communities need here at home. Healthcare is one that I know is on the top of mind of so many. This is an issue that we should not be divided on by party lines, because every one of us at some point in time in our lives either need that care ourselves or have a loved one who does. One of the teachers that I visited with over lunch today was named Sue, and she told me about her 20-year-old son named Scott. And she told me with tears in her eyes how Scott was born with a heart defect, and how at some point in his life he is going to need serious heart surgery. And how she's continuing to work so she can provide the health insurance for him as long as she possibly can to make sure that he's able to get that surgery. But as these tears were streaming down her face, I could feel her anguish, because she knows that at a certain point she won't be able to provide that for him herself. And so she pleaded, we must pass Medicare for all. We must have this universal health care.
That's right.
So that people like Sue and her son Scott can have the peace of mind and the security of knowing that when they need that help, they'll get it. That when each of us gets to that place where we need that help, when we need that care, we'll get it. And I promised her I would fight for that I would fight for her and fight for her son and fight for every single one of you to make sure that that happens.
Oh, no, I'm just standing here, Tulsi.
Hi, Tulsi. My name is Sarah, and I am a suicide loss survivor and a suicide prevention specialist. And so when I think about politics, I think about it, you talk about the nuclear threat, but for me, the threat is on the ground, right now. For the first time in American history, my generation will not live as long as my parents. And the three things underlying that are opioid-related deaths, suicide deaths, and alcohol-related deaths. And so when I come to these, I always come with sort of that piece of how are we going to help our people who are struggling and suffering and dying every day. And I'm feeling really afraid because there was so much damage done during the 2016 primary. And I see those stones starting to get picked up and thrown at each other already. And so my question to you is, how do you plan to run a campaign that fights for the issues we care so much about without leaving this wake of destruction and giving us 4 more years of Trump?
Thank you. By continuing to do what I have always done, and that is focus first and foremost on the issues that are facing the people of our country, and working together to bring about those changes and those solutions. Our politics have gotten so nasty and so destructive that it takes away from the real conversations that we need to be having about those issues that affect us all. The primary will be robust. I look forward to staying focused on how I can best be of service to the people of our country and how we can work together to solve the problems and challenges that we face. Thank you. Thanks for your leadership and your care.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Laura Dowling from Brattleboro, Vermont. My good friend Terry Lou from the Council of the Arts in Hawaii said to say hello. And pretty much everything that I'm passionate about has been asked. But one more thing that I'm wondering about is the at-home war we have on children in our schools. And adults or teens, wherever they go, mass murders happening every week, or at least, at the very least, scares where children are being now doing drills, hiding under desks. What ideas and thoughts do you have about dealing with this? Because I know there's many pieces to this puzzle, other than just thoughts and prayers.
Absolutely. Thank you. After the shooting yesterday in Aurora, in Chicago, your words ring all too clear. This is one of those unfortunate situations where an issue that has threatened or taken the lives of far too many people in this country has become that has been used as a political weapon rather than being treated and seen as the universal issue of concern that it is. We know that the vast majority of Americans support bringing about universal background checks. We have legislation that we've introduced in Congress to do so. It is only by having conversations, by bringing people together who may feel like they're on different sides on this issue, to find that common space, really, that it's about sensible gun safety reform and putting the pressure on lawmakers to make that change. That is how we'll see this change happen. I think that some of the work that's being done by the kids from Parkland in Florida has been incredibly impactful. They're really setting the example and setting the stage for how we can bring about this change. They've seen that change happen at the local level, at the state level, in a lot of places where their activism continues. Where even as they're going and telling their stories about the friends that they lost in that shooting, and even when they're confronted with protesters who are screaming and shouting in their faces, one of these kids told me that they brought flowers, and they started giving flowers to these protesters, asking them, can we talk? Let's just talk. And the hearts that have been opened, creating that opportunity, creating that ability for us really to come together as a country, to recognize this is not about one side attacking another side. This is about every one of us standing together for life. That's what needs to happen. That's the kind of change that we need to take place within our communities, within our country, and most especially within Washington. So I have high confidence that we'll pass legislation like the background check bill, the Senate. We'll need some work, but this is important work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, I just wanted to, first of all, thank you for your open-hearted leadership. I think we all feel it, and it's this kind of example that our people need to see. My question is, where do you start with climate change, the other big existential threat?
Where do we start? I think there's a few things that we can recognize about changes that we need to make right here in our country. I introduced legislation called the Off Fossil Fuels Act that seeks to wean our country off of fossil fuels, recognizing the detrimental impact that that our addiction to this kind of archaic use of energy has, and really the opportunity to build a green, sustainable, clean economy. But it also requires us to recognize that in order to make the kind of change that is necessary to address the climate crisis that we're facing, it will require a global strategy and an implementation of that strategy. So obviously it took a huge step backward when President Trump exited from the Paris Accord. But I think we can all agree that even that Paris Agreement didn't go far enough. So once again, I go back to the need to have leadership in this country that is based on cooperation, that is based on building partnerships around those interests that we share, working with other countries to actually bring about those kinds of changes that we know are necessary. Yes, it starts here at home. Yes, we need to make those urgent changes here at home, but we also need to be clear-eyed about the magnitude of this crisis and what will be required to make the real change that's necessary. Thank you.
Thank you so much for running.
Thank you.
My question is about government surveillance, and are you concerned about the current state and what could be changed about that?
Thank you. I'm a founding member of the caucus in Congress that is specifically focused on protecting our Fourth Amendment rights, our civil liberties, and privacy. It's a bipartisan caucus, co-chaired or co-founded by Republican Congressman Justin Amash from Michigan. And throughout the years, we have introduced both legislation as well as passed amendments to important bills that seek to roll back some of the egregious violations of our Fourth Amendment rights that were passed in things like the Patriot Act, FISA, the FISA Amendment Act, and others, the USA Freedoms Act. There's a bunch of different pieces of legislation that have taken us in the wrong direction. Later this year, the Patriot Act will be up for reauthorization. So already in Congress, we're organizing and we're working towards bringing about the real changes and the real reforms that we need to see to protect our civil liberties, to protect our privacy, both from overreaching government agencies, but also recognizing big tech companies who are also ignoring our privacy rights and abusing them for their profits. Some legislation we're currently working on right now is to bring about some serious reforms to the FISA court, the secret court that really no one has access to other than the lawyers who are in the room, but that impact our civil liberties and that impact our freedoms and our rights. So this has been and will continue to remain a focus of mine in making sure that those who argue, well, these things are necessary in order to secure our country, they do so by providing us with a false choice of saying you either give up your rights or you give up your safety. That is not a choice that any American needs to make. There is a balance that can and must be struck, where we can keep our people and keep our country safe while also protecting our constitutional rights. I like your shirt, man.
Thank you. Aloha.
Aloha.
Captain Gabbard. Oh my gosh.
What's your name?
My name is Garrett. I'm
Thanks
a
for being
Staff
here.
Sergeant in the Air Force.
Thank you for your service.
My question is about the national debt being $22 trillion and going over the top with our future at stake and our currency being devaluating, and also auditing the Fed. Do you plan on doing that?
I support auditing the Fed. I've taken that position legislatively in Congress as well. Many of the things that I've talked about, talking about how we're spending taxpayer dollars, talking about reprioritizing how we're spending those dollars, speak directly to your question about the debt. It is a travesty that politicians moan and groan and complain about not having enough money for education or roads or bridges or schools or hospitals, but you never hear those groans when it comes to starting new wars of choice. regime change wars, going to wars unnecessarily with other countries. So all of these things are tied in together. The issue of war and peace is not just an issue of foreign policy. It links directly to every single issue we face right here at home. Thank you.
Hi, Tulsi.
Hi, nice to see you.
You too. I'm wondering, are you going to get behind the Green New Deal, and how are you going to help to bring that about? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking at the resolution now. It's a non-binding resolution, and to be honest, I have a few concerns about some of the vagueness of some of the language in there, especially as it pertains to the environmental portion. So that's something that I'm looking at still. Regardless, we're looking at other pieces of legislation, bills that we are hoping to implement to really bring about the kind of change that I think is intended by the introducers of that resolution, and the change that we know we need to see. Thank you.
Aloha, Tulsi.
Aloha.
I just want to say first that the day you announced you were running for president is the first time I ever made a financial contribution to a presidential candidate. I'm very excited to do that.
Thank you very much.
My question is, well, first off, I'm an apprentice in the Carpenters Union.
Great.
And what drove me to make the decision to enter the union was a lack of willingness to take on 20 to 30 years of soul-crushing student loan debt. And I know that's a problem that a lot of people my age, in their early 30s, are facing. What do you plan to do to address that and sort of make access to education and higher education easier for people?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think you chose a good path.
Thank you.
I think there's a couple things that we've got to consider here. You know, I think there are two things that often get talked about as we look at the cost of higher education and, as you put it, the crushing student loan debt that is afflicting so many people in our country. My father-in-law is a high school teacher. He teaches at a public high school in Hawaii. What is he? He just turned 60, 61. He is still being crushed by his college loans. This is not anything abnormal. This is the reality of, as you said, 20, 30, 40 years of having to deal with this. So it is about the student loan interest rates. It's about how this debt is structured and how it is weighing heavily and causing such obstacles for so many people. It is about the cost of higher education, period, and how it is ever escalating and how people are expected to pay for it for those who choose that path. It is about really the lack of investment in providing opportunities in vocational education, as you've chosen. Not everyone chooses to go and get a four-year degree, which is completely fine. Many choose a vocational path, but there really aren't a huge amount of opportunities for that. Even as we talk about the infrastructure needs in our country are there, the opportunities are there. But the other thing that's also not talked about is really why the cost of education is soaring higher and higher. How too many of our higher educational institutions are really out of touch with the needs of our job market today. So we have people who spend all this money to get a really awesome fancy degree, and then they can't find a job when it's done. And then you have the question, the challenge, and the opportunity of how we can and should be leveraging technology to increase access to education in a way that is either extremely affordable or even free in many cases, and using that to bring down the cost of education. I got my degree a long time ago, but I did so, much of it while I was actually deployed. So a lot of my tests were taken in a tent, in a camp 40 miles north of Baghdad. I took tests online, had my books, and took classes. So things have only come a lot farther since then. Point being, we really need to look at this in a comprehensive way. from start to finish, ultimately to reach that objective of making sure that we have these great opportunities for everyone to choose what kind of education they would like for themselves and to be able to access it, to be able to afford it, to have the tools that they need, that you want to be able to secure your future. Thank you.
My name is Andrea, and I'm wondering what actions you would take as president to address the disparity in wealth and income.
Thank you, Andrea. You know, as we look at our economic policy in this country, we've seen how for far too long it is a policy that benefits the very wealthy or the corporations or the most powerful. And that has driven this income inequality gap to grow bigger and bigger and bigger. What we are seeing with Amazon is a great example about how our policies have made it so a corporation that made over $11 billion in profits last year not only paid no taxes, but got nearly $130 million in a tax rebate. Did any of you pay no taxes last year? No? I didn't. You did? You got one. Did you make $11 billion last year? There you go. Not even close. Not even close. It is getting to the heart of the problem of our economic policy that is not built for us, that is not built for we the people, that is not built for supporting and sustaining a strong middle class, that is at the heart of this problem. So there's a lot of different ways that we need to approach this. I think a starting point, it's not the solution, but a starting point is supporting the $15 minimum wage bill that we've introduced in Congress. But if you live in a place with a high cost of living, like ours in Hawaii, a living wage is a lot higher than that. So we really need to be talking about is a living wage and how we can make sure that folks who are working hard, who are working a full-time job, at a minimum are able to pay their rent and put food on the table and provide for their families. So as we approach tax policy, economic policy, trade policy, we have to flip the current policy on its head to make sure that we are working and putting the well-being of our people at the forefront of these policies and making those decisions through that context. Trade policy is an integral component to this, where the trade deals that we've seen that have been made with leaders and negotiators from big corporations sitting around the table, leaders from other countries sitting around the table, but really not an advocate, not a voice for how this impacts our people and our jobs here at home. The Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Deal, I was very outspoken being against that towards the end of the Obama administration for those reasons. Because we saw a deal that benefited transnational corporations, that hurt our environment, that hurt our American jobs, and that threatened our sovereignty. The part of this trade deal that would allow an independent panel to make decisions that impact our country, decisions that would supersede any action by our government, was mind-blowing to me. That we would give up our sovereignty to corporations somewhere else. What accountability do they have to our people? Absolutely none. They're accountable to their shareholders, wherever they're from. So again, as we look at these policies, we can begin to right this ship by making sure that first and foremost, we are putting the well-being of our people first.
So, aloha.
Aloha, sir.
And Vietnam veteran, and to you and all other combat veterans that have returned, welcome back.
Welcome home.
With all of the effects that war has on everything in our everyday lives, in America and around the world, and all the policies that you touched on, why are you the only individual discussing war and peace? What is it that others, Democrats, Republicans, they do not discuss it? It has the biggest impact on us all.
Great question.
Because like you, brother, I know the cost of war. But I encourage you to ask them that very question. Why is it that so many leaders from both political parties in this country are so eager for more war? War that does not serve our interests. War that does not make us more safe. It's war that makes us less safe. Just the other day, we heard Vice President Pence and others from this administration clamoring to start a new war against Iran. When will they ever tire? The cost of war is real. It's real for us, it's real for our troops, and it's real for the people in these countries where we wage these wars. I spoke with someone the other day who called me, sent me a message on Twitter, and asked to chat for a few minutes. We got on the phone, and he's an Iranian American, and his father was 17 years old during the revolution in Iran, and their family fled that country and came to America. But he talked about how at that time they knew very well that it was the United States government and the CIA that was behind the regime change and the riots and the covert war that was waged there. And the anger and the pain and the suffering that has ensued for decades since. This is why I'm running for president. Because no one is talking about these issues. Worse yet, far too many of our leaders are beating the drums of war and taking us farther in the wrong direction, rather than in the direction of peace and security and prosperity for us here and for the world. Thank you so much. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. I've been having a really hard time formulating this question because I'm trying to understand the root causes. And as a psychotherapist, as a teacher earlier with physics and kids in high school, once a week we would take a day out to just talk about being humans. And I want more of that in our schools, and I want more help for parents. I see parents struggling to make money and to also give children the values and the virtues that are so needed to be a healthy nation. I don't know how they do it. I couldn't do it. I mean, it's very, very tough. And I haven't heard people really addressing that root cause. People would joke years ago, I remember, it was NYPD Plu, the guy on that show, would say, why isn't there, some kind of parent license? We can drive a car, and have to have a license for that. But we don't have to do anything to be parents. And I think we all recognize that whatever we got from our parents before us, and their parents before us, and our parents before them. And if you had good parents and a history of good parenting, yay. If you didn't, we have very few resources. I teach the same thing over and over again as a psychotherapist that should be rigorously taught to every single human being on the planet. I mean, we're teaching how to be people, and I can't even practice what I preach Because I never got it. I know the ideas, but I don't, in practicing it's a whole nother level. So I'm wondering, I'm praying actually that when the churches have emptied out, that somehow, somewhere we bring that back in. And I'm guessing it's the very young, lowest level of society with our very youngest children and their very early parenting. And I would love you to address this as maybe actually the most important situation that we have going. Because if we bring up a 20-year good generation of healthy children and healthy parents, in 20 years, we could be done with everything we're talking about today.
I think there's two ways to answer your question. I'll do my best. From a government perspective, it is essential that we look at what the needs are in our communities, especially for those very young, for our children, recognizing that not everyone is coming from a beautiful, whole family and home. And see how we can help provide the resources, both in school and in other places, to care for those children. To do our best to help make sure that tools that they need, the care that they need, both physical health and mental health, are provided. And recognizing that if we as a country care about our future, we must make those investments early on in the lives of our children, our people. That can help stave off so many of the challenges that naturally continue to spin out of control. But there's a real deeper issue, which is the one that you're addressing. That's one of our culture, our society, and frankly, the way that we treat each other, whether we are family or not. And to me, the answer to that goes to what I started this conversation with, which is aloha. Really caring for each other, recognizing that we're all children of God, and we're all connected. And that when we care for each other, that drives us to take action to protect one another, not harm each other. To think about how our actions and our words can have a positive impact. That they be filled with love, that they be filled with kindness, even in some of the most difficult situations. Now, this is not easy. It's not easy. It may be one of the hardest things. But this is a change that each of us has a choice in taking a role to bring about. Just in our relationships every day, just in how we treat each other every day, and how infectious that can be. Thank you. I think this will be our last question.
Not even a question.
Okay.
So thank you so much. You give us a lot of hope. Now, this sweatshirt I've worn once at one of our peace vigils, just once. So I'd like to give you the sweatshirt off of my back to take